Real estate can be so numbers driven, but at the end of the day, it's a relationship business. It's all about the people. We are on the ground interacting with people and interacting with the land and the animals and the air and the water that interacts with that real estate. We don't have to do something just because somebody says we should, or just because that's where we think we should do. It's just making decisions and tuning into what are we passionate about.
Hey everyone, it's Tamara Thompson from Broadcast Your Authority, and I'm super grateful for our next guest that flew in from Colorado as we're here live in Las Vegas. And I'm going to actually have my co-host Joy introduce our next guest. Joy?
Thanks, Tamara. I am beyond excited to introduce to everyone Sarah Nolan. She specializes in regenerative investments through real estate, leading initiatives with the Four Cups and Bioregional Impact Network, Seeding Change. She brings together not only visionary business leaders, but real estate investors who share a commitment to building regenerative communities, organizations, and impact-driven enterprises. Through her global network of leaders, Sarah focuses on social, economic, and ecological advancements by aligning investment strategies with long-term sustainability. Her enterprise spans profitable, high-impact real estate ventures from urban homesteads and luxury retreats to hotels and thriving communities, ensuring that each investment contributes to a more sustainable and regenerative future. I'm so excited to ask you, Sarah, will you tell us a little bit more about how you got into this regenerative real estate, and also what does that mean?
So, it really started, I have to, whenever people ask me this question, think about where did it actually start? Most recently, it started with consulting business owners for the past decade and learning more about their desire to make an impact in the world and feeling this shift and this calling towards supporting them on a more tangible level to create the profit and impact and lifestyle changes that they were looking for. Now, that combined with, we're all influenced by what happened early on in our lives. And so I grew up around investments like this, regenerative type investments with real estate. And so that part of my life kind of pulled through, and I made that shift into real estate from a perspective of total passion, total alignment. And if we're going to do something like this, let's do it from a place of making this investment good for the people, good for the land, and good for my family and my great-great-grandchildren versus being extractive with how most or a lot of real estate can be. So let's just do it the right way.
Danielle and I dabble in real estate a little bit as well. And we actually started our Thompson & Thompson investment firm that's all focused on real estate investments coming up in the future here. So I'm really actually excited about this topic. But, I actually saw some things going on. I saw a bunch of things on social media. You took a trip down to Mexico. You have all these things going on. And tell us a little bit more about some of that stuff that you've got going on too, because you shared some plans, some beautiful documents. You were just sharing all these things. And I was like, more people need to know about that as well, what you got going on too.
Right. So I work with an advisory group called Seeding Change, which is part of the Four Cups. And we have experts from, all aspects of this business. So we have scientists, we have psychologists, we have financial strategists, business strategists, visionaries, and people focused on permaculture and ecology, geology, because those are all the pieces it takes to put together a piece of real estate. It's like it takes a village to birth one of these projects. And you've got to have the right people involved for it all to really manifest the way that you intend it to. So like in Mexico, we're working on an eco-health retreat center, resort, hotel. And
And that's why I wanted people to know about it. I'm like, this looks really cool. And when we were talking, you were so passionate about it as well. You're messaging me some information about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to like be shared with people too. Like, sorry to cut you off on that, but I was like, but I remember when you shared a little bit more about it, like, I just love that you were so passionate about what you're doing and creating as an experience and like all these people that you guys are bringing together to create this ecosystem.
You know, Tamara, real estate can be so numbers driven, but at the end of the day, it's a relationship business. It's all about the people. And what a lot of people don't remember always is it's also about the planet. It's this square of Earth. Like, this is Earth. I remember when I went to get my real estate license and learning about the land and like what goes into real estate, and just being so moved by like, this is my piece of land that I have the honor, the sacred responsibility of stewarding. And I think we can get so removed by that as consumers, everyday people, or anybody involved in real estate, that like, this is commercial real estate investors are some of the most influential people on the planet, because we are on the ground interacting with people, and interacting with the land and the animals and the air and the water that interacts with that real estate. So these regenerative real estate projects are really vehicles to make massive impact, starting from that one location, but also, people who experience that get to bring that experience back to their home and say, wow, I just like experienced this renewable energy that I had never heard of before, where there's these buoys that generate in the water, in the ocean, that generate electricity for that resort. And it's like, well, what if we had buoys, where we live, or whatever, even if it's just solar or something like that, in different ways of doing waste management. So they're experiences where people can be transformed by.
Do you think that professionals and investors like can integrate passion and purpose into their own business more? I know the people that you work with have that, but how can these individuals, maybe people that are actually watching this episode that are in the investment space, what would you tell them on how to integrate passion and purpose into their business model?
I would say the same thing that I tell other real estate agents is, because like I said, the whole world of real estate can be so numbers driven, and just get passionate about anything, tune into what are you passionate about and focus on that. Like, if you're really passionate about hospitality, which I am, I grew up around hospitality. Like, for as long as I can remember, my family had a multi-generational hospitality business, and I'm super passionate about that. So that's where I put my focus. And then what else am I passionate about? And then we bring that into whatever we're doing. We don't have to do something just because somebody says we should, or just because, that's where we think we should do. It's just making decisions, and tuning into what are we passionate about.
Oh, that's so good. I love what you're saying, especially about your great-great-grandchildren, because I always think about 7 generations.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of reciprocity. And so I have goosebumps listening to you. I'm like, isn't there somebody out there paying attention to our Mother Earth in a very respectful way that honors all beings, and everything. And so the question that I really want to ask about is, it seems like you're talking about regeneration, but it also seems like you're talking more about a higher calling of reciprocity and something that's even more profound than just the word regeneration. So I would love to hear more about that gut passion you keep talking about how that drives your vision for how this is unfolding, because I just think it's magical.
Yeah, it really does come down to that. We take regeneration to very deep levels. And when you talk about, great-great-grandchildren and reciprocity, I mean, part of this honestly is my great-great-grandfather was the one that started that hospitality business back in New Hampshire. And I'm grateful to him every single day. And I just imagine what am I leaving for my great-great-grandkids, and how am I impacting them positively? And what if we all were doing that it's just a consciousness that I've developed by having the influence of my ancestors and knowing my ancestors. And that's part of this process with regenerative real estate and the way that we work with Seeding Change is we know our ancestors, and we have a whole ancestors experiential process that we take people through, where they get to know not only their ancestors from, many generations ago, their human ancestors, but also where did you come from in the world, and what trees and mountains and rocks and earth helped to raise you. I mean, that goes, really deep into, a whole different realm, but that's also a part of this. And there is a spiritual element to it that helps us to connect to, again, getting away from just the numbers, but getting back into the heart of it. And it really comes down to, where did this land come from? Who's involved? What is the holistic system that's involved in this land and in this project? And who's going to be impacted by it now? And who's going to be impacted by it 1,000 years from now?
Right. I always say connection is the correction.
Yeah.
And you're speaking my language. I just love it.
I know, Tamara, we were talking about Egypt earlier.
Yeah.
And think of who built the Egyptian pyramids. And think about, I don't know the exact dates. Yeah. And what if we were building things and designing things that could last the same way and cause that curiosity and that activation of the Egyptian pyramids?
This is so profound. And I really feel like we're going the way of the future with this, even though, sometimes to go forward is to look back, because with people moving around and wanting to develop other places, it's so important to respect the history, the ancestry, the land. You've talked a little bit about this amazing soon to come resort in Mexico. Would you share a little bit more of some of these longer term projects, how they've really impacted the community, what the bottom line looks like? Will you just go into a little more detail about this? It's also delicious. I love it.
So the resort in Mexico is really interesting. Like I said, they're using it as a vehicle for positive impact. They're basically using renewable energy to run the resort. They're using it as a way to be a positive influence on the community, because this is in a remote location where there's not a lot of tourists, but there's a lot of tourists starting to come in. So we're like, okay, this is a perfect example where tourism is kind of birthing around here. And we want to have an actual positive influence on the local community. And they're using it as a way to educate people on regeneration and a higher consciousness way of living. And we do all of this with profitability. So a lot of people come into stuff like this and say, well, it's a philanthropic pursuit. But no, these are all profitable. And the idea is that the more impact you make, the more profitable you are, and vice versa. And so we just design it like that. There's another one that is more focused on anthropology in California. It's in one of the San Diego deserts. That is also a retreat center, an educational center, and that's being led by an evolutionary biologist. And she's teaching, on site, and also it's an experience where people can come and visit. And there are practices that she's using to help restore the land, regenerate the land, and support the water systems there. So it's like just multi-layers of impact that's being created.
This is so rich. You brought up a couple words that, to your point, it's so delicious. But the word regenerative. You brought up the word stewardship, which I think is really important. You talked about having a sacred responsibility to that stewardship, but you also talked about your deep connection to the hospitality industry in your family and creating experiential opportunities for people. And what strikes me, I love that what you're saying about striking the balance, the blend in sustainability and profitability, so that the project could be both good for the land, good for the people long term, and good, for the planet, all the way around, good for the profitability. And that is, I mean, such an honorable calling. I applaud your efforts in furthering this. But it strikes me that it's not just regenerative for the land. It's regenerative for the people that get to plug into these places where they can have experiences and get in touch with their ancestral roots or their cultural opportunities, and that concept of stewardship of the planet, right? When you can really celebrate that in the projects and tell people what you're doing when they come to those resorts, that's so special. Can you share some of the key practices that people can utilize, these developers can utilize, or investors can utilize, that are, these key regenerative practices or features that they can integrate in their projects?
There's a wide range of types of projects. Like we have those resorts, like I was telling you about, resorts, retreat centers. We also have a regenerative flower farm, and we also have an addiction recovery detox center and community that's being developed. So there's, we've got the whole spectrum that's going on here. And it all comes down to, what is the energetic exchange being involved? And what are ways that we can give back to the community? Whatever we're doing, wherever we're going, how can we give back to the community? How can we give back to the land? And how can we give back to ourselves in the process? And that's the very basic foundation that we come from. We ask these questions. And then when you get into the specific industry or the specific focus, then we can get more detailed about where we go from there. But it's really important to work with talented experts in science and in finance and business to make these truly making the impact that we intend to. Because it's one thing to say, okay, I want to start a farm on this property. I want to have some regenerative agriculture, and then look at some blogs and documents and things and then come up with this idea. It's a whole other thing to work with a scientist who can tell you, you actually want to do it this way because that's how nature works. And we're informed by nature when we do things with the land, and work with a business strategist to help them to have a well thought out and rounded business map in creating this project so that it ends up being profitable in the way that's intended, in growing and thriving. So it's having the right team, it's asking the right questions, and it's being really mindful and thoughtful and inquisitive about the past, the present, and the future.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I would think that it sounds like it has both an inward and an outward focus, right? So inwardly, you're probably looking at things like, what's the carbon footprint of this project? What's the energy exchange? Even utilizing local labor and materials and sustainable materials. I would think closer to home, the better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. But then it also sounds like the outward part of that is like, how can this project give back to the community, impact the people that live there and the people that come in to experience it? Is that accurate?
Yes.
It's both. It's both of those.
And another part that I haven't touched on yet is looking at who are the original native peoples of the land, and looking at how can we give back to those communities if they still exist, which a lot of them still do, but have been displaced into other areas. And they also have wisdom that can be helpful for the project. Like they might know, you have to grow this kind of plant on that land. So there can be a collaboration and even a partnership with the original people. And that can look a variety of different ways, but that's what's happening in Mexico and in California is we're collaborating with the original native peoples to give back to them who cultivated that land for thousands of years for us. And then to also gain wisdom and insight, part of that cycle of creating something, for the future.
I love that. That's such a great way to honor the cultural heritage of that land and also get the buy-in. And to your point, the wisdom, the collective wisdom that's available there. I know, we have family that lives in Australia, and Australian government's in the process because there's been, the Aboriginal people have been displaced from their land right in the interior of the land. And so to your point, I mean, they know so much about how to take care of that land because of just thousands of years of taking care of that land. And I think we saw it in the Australian wildfires like a couple of years ago that the firefighters were then leaning into the Aboriginal people to say, okay, what are some of these practices that we should have used?
Exactly.
So I love that you're leaning in culturally as well, not just on the environmental and the green building side of things, but also on the cultural side of things, because that truly brings it full circle regeneratively, it seems.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Yeah, it's
Like,
really cool.
If there was if people wanted to become involved with what you're doing in these different projects and different areas that you're expanding in, how would they get information? Like, could you share a little bit more with our audience about how they could get involved with this and like maybe some other projects that you have coming up?
Sure. So we're launching a lot of educational opportunities. There's going to be different levels of webinars and retreats and pop-ups and things like that. So you can go to seedingchange.com. It's really simple, just how it sounds, seedingchange.com. And you can also reach out to me on our real estate specific side, which is lifeupleveled.kw.com. And those are two different ways that you can get more information. We can have conversations. You can learn more about the profitability models and the regenerative models and just see, how does this all work with what I'm doing right now with investing? How can I make it more regenerative and how can I make it more profitable and combine the two and really make something that is going to outlive, your future ancestors.
I'm so grateful that you took the time to fly out today and share a little bit more about the message and everything that you're doing. It's very powerful. And I think more people need to lean into these types of opportunities for the future and thinking this way. I don't know about you ladies, but I think we should all go down to Mexico to the resort and support when it's done.
Let's go.
Are
Let's go.
margaritas regenerative?
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes they are, right?
Well, I do. I appreciate you so much for coming out and thank you for sharing your journey and your mission, your passion, and all the shifts that you've been doing over the years. So I'm just grateful to know you. Thank you for coming in here.
Can't wait to see what you do
I'm so
next.
grateful to be here. Thanks.
And those of you that are watching this episode and feel called to reach out to Sarah and learn more about what she's up to and all the incredible people that she's working with, I highly recommend it. We'll have all the links in the descriptions below. Please subscribe to our channel as well as leaving us a review on Apple and Spotify or wherever you tune into your podcasts. And we'll see you in the next episode.